You're listening to the Savoir-Faire audio experience.
Are you ready?
The Savoir-Faire experience is your guide to everything that has to do with lifestyle. From dating, rides, style, and entertainment. All brought to you by the editor of Savoir-Faire magazine, Robert White. Anything goes on this audio experience. So, let's go.
It's still the best.
All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the Savoir-Faire audio experience. Thank you guys for following, sharing, and continuing to comment on these episodes. I love seeing the great comments, and we're going to continue to bring you very interesting and cool people that we interview here at Savoir-Faire. Today's really no exception. This gentleman is a public speaker, has a ton of knowledge about a very specific topic that we'll dive into. But today we're talking with Tom Savard. How are you doing, Tom?
I'm doing great today. How are you?
Yeah, doing excellent, man. The sun is kind of shining today in New York, so it's kind of teasing us weather-wise. So
That's nice.
Yeah, I'm hoping we get some warmer weather soon. I think the weekend's going to be a good one, though.
I think we hit 60 yesterday here in Minnesota, so it's nice to see some warm weather. Yeah,
60 with the sun would probably be perfect for us here in New York. We're hoping to get 70s this weekend, but it's going to rain, so I'm not quite sure how that's going to play out. But either way, I'm excited to have the weather kind of change. But Tom, I definitely want to dive into a lot of information about you and what you've been up to with your career, and obviously writing some books. But I want to kind of let my audience know who you are from your own voice. So I want to ask kind of a real simple question. If you handed me your resume, what would I learn about you?
Yeah, so great question. So what you would learn is that I have done a variety of work leading product development teams in different types of industries. So whether it's medical device, automotive industry, telecommunications, or even aerospace. And in that time that I have led those teams, I have developed some practices and techniques to help teams accelerate value. And now that I've really turned that into my full-time career, less about leading teams now and more about consulting with other leaders about how to improve the outputs of their organization.
Okay, very cool. I saw something online, I think on your website, where you really kind of do dive into Six Sigma, right? And I've heard this term thrown around quite often, but I don't know exactly what it is. So can you give me a definition and then kind of do a little deep dive on what it is that you do in this category?
Yeah, sure. So Six Sigma has what I would call several different flavors. So sometimes Six Sigma refers to improving an existing process. So you might have a manufacturing process that is struggling with poor yields or poor throughput, and you want to improve that process to accelerate the output from that factory. Six Sigma has another flavor called Design for Six Sigma, which is used primarily in the product development process, and that is where teams are using the concepts of Six Sigma to address uncertainties in their product development, right? So whenever you create a new product, there are some things you don't know. How well will the product perform? How are we going to build it? What's the best way to assemble it and design it, right? So there's all these uncertainties, and you can use the practices of Design for Six Sigma to help do that more efficiently. What I've done really with this book is try to level it up one level and think about how to address the concepts of uncertainty in a variety of organizations, whether it's product development or marketing or operations, because ultimately what Six Sigma can help you do is, first of all, identify uncertainty, then prioritize the uncertainties that are really important to understand for your project, and then lastly, Six Sigma allows you to perform your project or your product can perform within the presence of those uncertainties. So it's a really great way to make a robust process or product or business.
Okay, so it's a data-driven methodology is kind of the Google term for this, right? So ideally, you're kind of going in with, let's collect as much data as we possibly can, figure out how to be more efficient, and then make those changes. Is that kind of the rough definition of Six Sigma?
Yeah, I think so. It's definitely data-driven, but it also helps you prioritize, right? So one of the issues that I cover in the book is that when you take traditional Six Sigma and apply it just kind of blindly to product development, what you can end up doing is solving a bunch of problems that aren't really meaningful for the product design, right? You can design something to the 10th decimal place, and it really only needs to be designed to the first decimal place, right? So Six Sigma, when applied correctly, also helps you prioritize the right things to look at, and then ignore the things that are less meaningful to the performance of your product or process.
Okay. Do they mainly use Six Sigma in a manufacturing setting, or is it other categories as well?
So I would say mostly it is used in areas of manufacturing or designing products to be manufactured. That's the most common application. There are maybe some other less common flavors of Six Sigma that might apply to things like software. And then I've also certainly used it in like a business process, like transactional processes, like let's say marketing, right, and improving marketing outcomes. But the bulk of it is used in addressing uncertainty in manufacturing and in product development.
Okay, very cool. Well, I want to pick your brain because you've been in this category for 25 plus years. You've definitely done a lot of public speaking. You've worked with companies to help them organize some stuff. So, over all of these experiences, what are some really simple kind of tips that you kind of share on a regular basis? What's part of like your script every time you're on stage? I'm really curious about some of the little things that people could kind of pick your brain about or learn from you from all of the experience that you have in this category.
Yeah. Well, okay, that's a really good question. So while the foundation of my work and learning came from my degree and then also my work in Six Sigma, what I apply it mostly now is to product development. And oftentimes, depending on the size of company you're in, there's honestly some confusion over what product development teams are creating. And that might sound surprising, but oftentimes when I'll ask a product development leaders, what are your teams making? And they'll describe the widget, right? They'll describe the widget that the teams are making, whether it's a navigation device or a heart valve or some kind of a switch. And that's actually what the manufacturing team makes, right? So they're actually the ones that make the product. And so then I ask them a couple other times, what do your product development teams make? And when you do product development, you have to create documents, right, that kind of capture the know-how that you're developing. And so they'll then say, well, we create requirements documents, and we create tests, and we create all these other types of paperwork. And so I challenge them one more time, and I say, what do product development teams really make? And they eventually get around to recognizing that product development teams create know-how. And once they recognize that, you can think about know-how as something that, think about product development teams as know-how factories. And when you think about them as know-how factories, then you can use a kind of a factory mindset to help accelerate their work. Any way to accelerate or streamline the discovery and management of the know-how will create more efficient speed to value, which is ultimately the most important aspect of product development. So know-how is what they create.
Yeah. So the know-how aspect is that I'm going to kind of isolate this a little bit because I want to understand it. So are we talking about the people, let's say there's a physical product and they're writing the instruction booklet on what it is and how it works? Or is this more of the marketing perspective by educating an audience about why they need a product?
Okay, well, it's actually slightly different from that even. What it really is how does the product work? So, for example, take your garage door opener, right? You might have the instruction manual for your garage door opener. That's not really what I'm talking about. And you might also have the marketing, which says, hey, this is going to be the greatest garage door opener ever. But what I'm really talking about is, okay, how the design teams need to understand how the motor is going to work, how it's going to engage the chain to pull up that garage door, what range of garage door weights the motor is going to have to work with, and so on and so forth, right? So it's really the know-how that makes that explains how the product is going to work, and then ultimately how they're going to manufacture it in the long run.
Okay, that makes sense. So it is kind of educating the customer aspect, but they really need to have all the nuts and bolts. They need to know exactly how this whole thing works so that they can build the documents or have the knowledge to be able to educate other people about it.
Well, and make sure it works properly, right?
Yeah.
That's the key thing, is to make sure it's going to work consistently every time.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sure you've had a situation where you come home and you try to hook your car or your headphones up to your car, right? And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it connects to your computer inside the house instead of to your car, or things like that, right? The idea here is to create things that work consistently every time for every customer, and that's what and create those things. So what I try to do is help teams create those things in a faster, more efficient way, so they're not spinning their wheels investigating things that aren't important to the overall product, and to make sure that the critical things they really, really do understand.
Okay, makes sense. Let's pivot from that a little bit and talk about the production development aspect, because the production development aspect is part of where the Clarity Cascade came from, this book that you wrote. So, I mean, I'm looking at the cover right now and it says Unleashing Hidden Value to Accelerate Product Development and Multiply ROI. And I love the word ROI because every business person in the world wants that. And so I'm really curious about the Clarity Cascade and what kind of like blueprint are you putting in this book to really kind of guide people? And what's the book about, like understanding it a little more?
Yeah. So the book is about using clarity and purpose to help teams accelerate value creation. And the explaining the book kind of prompts me to think a little bit about how the book was kind of developed. So after my career in leading teams in different industries to create these products, I said, I want to create some lessons that I've learned. I had the opportunity to work with some really great leaders, really great teams, and they gave me the chance to experiment with some things and figure out what works best to help teams accelerate value. So I wrote the book, and as I was writing the book, I was having conversations with lots of different people about the different chapters. And interestingly, my wife, who's a physical therapist and doesn't do much in the same kind of career that I have, she said, that's really interesting. So I thought, well, what's making it interesting? And we had several conversations. And so I pulled out common themes from all the chapters. And it's really called this clarity mindset. What I realized is that in each chapter, even though I was addressing a different problem in product development, each chapter had some common things. First of all, clarity and purpose were really important. And then secondly, there were 5 practices that helped create clarity and purpose. And that's called the clarity mindset. So those 5 practices I pulled out of the chapters and put them into the front of the book. And I think that mindset, that clarity mindset, is applicable to many different industries and functions. It's not just product development, right? So if you're in an organization creating any kind of value, this concept of the clarity mindset can help you create clarity and purpose for your teams. Once you apply that clarity mindset to several things within your organization, whether it's strategy, goal setting, performance management, organizational design, and so on and so forth, then you get what I call the Clarity Cascade, which means the value that your teams are able to create is really multiplied compared to what they were able to do before. And so there are several examples in the book where I was able to take either teams or companies and not just increase their return on investment by 10, 20, 30%. We found ways to multiply their benefits, in some cases, 6 times improvement in return on investment. So that's the power of the Clarity Cascade.
Yeah, that's really cool. So I want to dive into a little bit more about the book and ask some more questions about it. So obviously the clarity mindset that you mentioned is very unique and very cool that you kind of were able to incorporate some of that stuff into the book. I'm really curious about some of the stories where you just mentioned, like I've worked with some businesses, we were able to kind of implement some of this stuff and see the return on investment. So what are some examples that you can tell me that people can read about in the book?
Sure. Yeah. So so one example that I talk about frequently is I call it the cycle of distrust, meaning that between leadership and individual contributors, there's this distrust between, hey, we've got a goal and we want you to hit this goal, and the employee's like, well, that goal's really hard, and what if I don't hit it? Should I sign up for it, or should I try to negotiate for an easier to hit goal, right? Mm-hmm. And I've seen this in quite a few organizations. And if you use, instead of this paradigm of focusing only on predictability and only on hitting the goal, but change it to a paradigm that measures both the best practices that the employees and teams are using to hit a very aggressive goal, or to meet a very aggressive goal, and to some extent a weighting and measurement of whether they hit it or not. If you use that mixed approach, you can actually get teams to sign up for much more ambitious goals and actually find out what the organization is capable of, rather than them always wanting to find a goal that they can for sure hit. I call that predictable mediocrity. And instead, what we want teams to do is achieve breakthrough performance. And you can do that by setting meaningful, aggressive goals, and then incentivizing people to do the best possible things to achieve those goals. They may hit it, they may not, but they're giving you their best outputs.
Okay, so what are some of the examples of incentives that people could give to their team to kind of get them motivated to hit larger goals than just the ones that are like, the low-hanging fruit?
Yeah. So first of all, the goal needs to be set with clear purpose, right? It shouldn't be arbitrary. It should be clear to the team why the goal is set in the way it is. Maybe there's an existential threat to the company. In one example, I was working for a company that made heart valves, and they were using creating traditional valves that required open heart surgery to implant into the patient. But at the same time, there were competing companies developing new types of heart valves where instead of doing open heart surgery, they could actually insert the valve through an artery in the leg and kind of thread that valve all the way up through the arteries and into the heart and deploy that valve, in a matter of minutes instead of having to do open heart surgery. So the company was facing this existential threat of well, they're going to lose a lot of their valve business because they don't have this alternative way of delivering heart valves into patients.
Yeah.
So basically what happened is the management set a pretty aggressive goal. They didn't do the best job with clarifying the purpose there. I mean, they just said, hey, we need you to get this done fast. I think they could have done a better job saying, hey, we're facing this existential threat, and if we don't get this done, we're gonna have challenges with our business and not be able to invest in future products and things like that. But nonetheless, we took on that challenge, and what I did is I gave the team other opportunities to demonstrate performance besides just hitting the milestone. We set that goal of getting it done in 2 years. We absolutely said, all right, we're going to go for it. And they were all worried about, well, what if we fail? What if we can't get the project done? I said, let's not worry about that. Let's take all these fears you have and turn them into risks that we can actually create action plans around and address. So we took all that energy that was built up in fear, turned it into a real great product development plan. And then we executed and we used things like best practices in requirements management. That's really a way of really trying to clarify what your product needs to do in a crisp, concise way so that you're not, I'd say, kind of taking a random walk through the design space and being unclear where you're trying to, what your goals really are. So we use requirements management. We use the techniques that I've mentioned already around design for Six Sigma. And the key there was establishing a framework for prioritizing the work we were doing. So we implemented best practices around that. And then the other thing was that we implemented best practices around transparency, meaning, hey, if there's an issue, let's not keep it inside to a small team and just focus on trying to fix it ourselves and try to hide things. Let's be transparent about the issues so we can work together as a team to address them. And a combination of those best practices plus really great smart engineering allowed us to reach those milestones ahead of plan. So it was great. We didn't worry about hitting the milestone, but we actually hit it because we were doing all the right things.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, actually. I think about like companies where the management doesn't get the team involved and give them the transparency or the clarity on the issues that they're kind of facing. And like I've seen it in sales jobs and things like that, right? Maybe like a new company just showed up. They sell the same thing that we do. They're doing it faster and better for whatever reason. And instead of going to the employees or the team and basically saying, hey, we now have competition. We need to step up our game. So now we're going to increase, how much more we need to be aggressive as far as sales or whatever. A lot of management companies that I've seen, like even in some of these cases, maybe that you're talking about, don't really give people the clarity or give their team the clarity of the mission or what's kind of happening within the industry. They just go in and kind of raise the amount of money we need to start selling or whatever. And people are just frantic and get overworked and get concerned. And then what the heck is going on? So the clarity aspect is very cool. I like when employers really kind of bring their employees into the circle and let them be part of the problem. And what you're talking about with this example is very unique too, that they would have, not look at the problems as problems, but break them down as risks so they can be analyzed, they can be figured out, and then having, transparency and good communication so that different teams can kind of bring, okay, we're having this problem and how do we solve it so that other parts of that team can actually get involved and potentially help them solve those issues to keep everybody moving forward. But I think the transparency part or the clarity part in the very beginning is the unique piece that management really does allow the team to take on some of the information and allow them to run with it and get them competitive with whatever they're building, especially like that heart valve thing. That's a great example of something like that. So, obviously open heart surgery is like a very risky kind of thing. It's a big, scary thing for people to do. And then when you find out there's a company that can do it in a completely different way without open heart surgery, that's got to be alarming. So it's cool to see that the company pivoted, the management got involved. That's really cool that you were a part of that project.
Yeah, it was really a fun one. I think one of the keys in this clarity mindset is around acknowledging uncertainty. And oftentimes in businesses, uncertainty is a very scary word to leaders. But the fact is, product development involves uncertainty. So by embracing that fact, you can actually design better organizations and better teams to address and perform within that uncertainty. So I think that's a really key factor. We didn't know for sure if we could get that project done in a couple of years. But we went for it. And to that extent, it's kind of like a sports team. You never know if a sports team is going to, win the Super Bowl or not. But if they're doing all the right things relative to, pass completions and good blocking and good tackling, the odds are certainly better that you're going to have a great team that gets pretty far in the playoffs.
Yep. Yeah, I love that analogy too. It's easier for people to understand what you're talking about. I really appreciate it. So I wanted to kind of direct some people over to your website, your social accounts, things like that. So the Clarity Cascade is available on where? Amazon? Is it on Amazon right now?
Yeah, it's on Amazon.
Okay,
yep,
great.
It's on Amazon.
Yep, and they can also find it on the innovationdoctors.com, which is you. So the Innovation Doctors, is that like a kind of a nickname that has been handed down to you?
Yeah, it is. And I'm in the process of building a consulting agency. I've done consulting kind of off and on a smaller scale. But this Innovation Doctors is the business plan there is to create a boutique kind of consulting where, we have a process that several folks can leverage to create to accelerate value within their organization. So that's going to be the ultimate goal here. I have affiliations with other organizations right now that I'm supporting that are not part of this consulting group. And I should point out that, everything I'm saying here is related more to my personal opinions and the innovation doctors, and not part of other affiliations that I have. But either way, what I'm doing kind of day in, day out is helping companies accelerate value in their product development process.
Yeah, very makes sense, and it's a very noble cause. I also do some of that stuff on the side from magazines. I've clearly learned and met a lot of people, learned a lot from really great people, and I'm starting to implement the similar kind of concept that you are by sharing some of that knowledge into the world in a different format. So yeah, I really kind of do love the idea that you and I were able to connect and talk about this. I want people to check out the Clarity Cascade, available on Amazon. But Thomas, I really appreciate you finding some time to chit chat with me today and just kind of let us into your world a little bit. It's very unique.
Yeah, thank you so much, Robert. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to the show. Please take a minute to head over to www.savfair.com and subscribe to our publication.